So welcome students. So students, today we are going to understand the difference between these keys. Now in the previous class we have discussed about the primary key, and I told you that a primary key is a unique key that is associated with every record. So we cannot have duplicates. So if we set a particular field as a primary key, so that should be unique for every record. So this is something that we have learned in the previous class, and today we are going to understand the difference between the primary key, the candidate key, the alternate keys, the composite key, and the foreign key. So let us understand the difference. So let us take an example, and this is a table for the vehicle table. Now in this particular table, these are the fields, the columns, and the columns are the ID. Now normally by default we set ID as the primary key. So ID will always hold a number that will be unique for every record. So by default anyway we have the ID for this particular table, and then we have the model name, the name of the model name of the vehicle, and the it's not mode, it's model. I'll just change this. So that's a model, and then what we are doing is, the model number, the model name, and every vehicle has a registration number, right? So every vehicle will have a registration number which will be unique for every vehicle. It is not possible that two vehicles will have the same registration number. Also, every vehicle will have a engine number which is also a unique number. Every engine will get a unique number. So every vehicle will have a unique number, engine number. And there is something called as a chassis number. Even this is a unique number for every vehicle. Okay. And then there can be price, there can be colors, and there can be few more fields, but I'm just keeping it limited ones. Now, to understand what exactly is a candidate key, I'll go to the previous slide. So we're going to understand the difference between the primary key, the candidate key, and the alternate key. Okay, so what is a candidate key? Now, candidate keys are the keys which can be set as primary key, or which are eligible to become a primary key. For example, like in a real life example, we have elections, and in an election there are 4 to 5 candidates for one particular seat or one particular area, and so out of that 4 to 5 candidates, one candidate will win the election, right? Similarly, these are like the ID, the registration number, engine number, the chassis number. These are the candidate keys. Okay, why? Because any one of them can become a primary key, because ID is anyway a default ID which is unique for every record. Then registration number is also unique for every vehicle. So even this can be made as a primary key. Even engine number is unique, chassis number is also unique. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, all these 4 fields can be set as a primary key. So these are basically the candidate keys. The keys that are eligible to become a primary key is called as candidate keys. Now for example, if I make a registration number as the primary key, okay, so this registration number becomes the primary key, and the rest of the keys like the engine number, the chassis number, and the ID, they will be called as alternate keys. So the keys which are not, or should I say the candidate keys which are not chosen as a primary key, or which are not as a primary key, they will be called as alternate key. So that can be the definition, a perfect definition. So candidate keys are the keys which are eligible to become a primary key. Alternate keys are the keys, are the candidate keys which are not chosen as a primary key. Okay, a bit confusing, but you know, to understand the difference. So with this particular example, you can actually make it, understand. So if I make ID as my primary key, so 1, 2, 3, these three will become my alternate keys. So one will become the primary key and the rest will be called as the alternate keys. So that's the difference between a primary key, the candidate key and the alternate key. Now, what exactly is a composite key? A composite key is basically, you know, a composite key is basically the combination of one or two, candidate keys which is been set as a primary key. So I can make ID and the registration number together. I will combine them. So even ID will be my primary key and even registration number will be my primary key. So there are two keys which I have set as a primary key. So these two will be called as a composite key because they are together, they are working as a primary key. So that's a composite key. So more than one field, if we set as a primary key, it will be called as a composite key. Then we have the foreign key. Now what exactly is a foreign key? I'm going to show this with an example. Okay, so let us first switch to LibreOffice, and this I'm going to close this. Okay, this is the screen that you're going to come across the moment you launch the LibreOffice, and you give a name to your database. So the name of my database is sunbeam.ogb. So understand the extension. It can be like 1 mark question. The extension used for the database file is OGB. That is open database. Okay, open database. Now what we will do is we will create a table. Again, we are going to go to tables, select tables, and then there is an option called as create table in design view. The moment I click over here, now we are going to design the table. And I'm also going to explain you about the field properties. Okay, so first the field I'm going to choose is ID by default, and I'm going to make this as number, that is a numeric. Now there are other numbers also, like we have the small integer, floating, real values, that is the decimal values. So all these are different data types. So I'm going to just upload the contents related to this so that you can just read out that. Okay, so these are the different data types. Data types means what kind of data that particular field is going to hold. So ID is basically going to hold numbers, so I will just take numeric, that is number. Okay, and then I'm going to say that is for example, we will take the same table. We are going to create the table for student. So if this is for student, so student is going to have the roll number, and again roll number is going to be a number. And then I'm going to have the student name. So student name, I can keep it as text. Now let us understand, as we design the table, let us understand the field properties as well. Now field properties, for example, I have taken name. So you can select that data type, that is text. If you want to change, you can change it, but I'm going to keep this as text itself because I'm going to enter text right in this particular field, that is a name of the student. Now below over here at the bottom, you can see there is something called as field properties out here. And 1, 2, 3 and 4, there are 4 properties that are being shown out here. The first one is entry required. Now what exactly is entry required? And by default it is no. So entry required is no, which means that if the user does not enter any value for name, if he leaves this particular field as blank, then it's fine, it will be accepted. Okay, but if I make this, I'll go click out here and select yes. Now if I make this entry required as yes, this means that this will mean that the user cannot leave this particular field as blank. Okay, so user has to enter something in this particular field. He or she cannot leave this particular field as blank. So if it tries to do that, okay, there is going to be an error. So entry required, yes, there has to be some entry in this particular field. So that is what entry required means. If you set this as yes, then the user cannot leave this particular field as blank. Then we have the length. Length is 100, which means 100 characters, because this is a text. So it will mean 100 characters. So if you want, you can increase this or you can decrease it. You can keep it as 50 characters. So user can only enter up to 50 characters. Or you can also increase this like 200. For example, for student, they can also have address. So for address, I don't think that 100 characters are sufficient. We at least require 200 characters, right? Somebody can have a address which is quite long, so we can set it around 200 characters. So this is the characters where we can set the length of that particular field. Then we have default value. Now default value is something like you have set a particular field that is entry required is no, example, okay, and then default value you set something. For example, I can also have a field, okay, let us have okay, I'm not going to do any default value for this. I'm going to keep this entry required as yes. And what I'm going to do is, let us quickly create some more fields, that is class. Now for class, I don't think I require 100 characters. I just required maybe max to max 20 characters, right? Class is like from 1 to 12, but still I'm going to keep 20 characters. That is more than sufficient. Then I'm going to keep one more field, that is section, and even for section I'm going to keep that max to max as 20 characters. And then I can also have something called as address of the address of the student. So in that case, I'll change this as 200. Okay, and entry required, okay, I'll keep it as no. Okay, then again I'm going to create one more, that is email. Okay, email address. So email address, now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to keep this entry as no, and default value I'm going to say that is no email ID. Okay, no email ID. So what does this mean is, by default, if the user does not enter anything into the email ID, because the entry required is no, okay, in that case a default value, that is no email ID, will be automatically entered in this particular field. So that is the default value that I have set for this particular field. And then we have a format example. In any kind of format, which kind of format you want your data to be entered. For example, if there is something called as price, though price is a field that doesn't suit this particular table, because this is related to the student. But I'm saying, if there is a table called as product, so product means there will be data related to products, and every product is going to have price. In that case, I can change in which format. For example, I'll just take this for an example. I will take this just for a an example purpose, that is price, and I keep this as maybe number. And now I can go to format, and I can you know choose any format. Like I can choose this one, so this will be like one that is 1235, there is a comma over here. So I can set this format, or I can also go to currency, and I can now display it in this particular format. You just select whichever format you want and click OK. So the data will be placed in that particular format. Okay, so just I'm going to remove this now. Okay, so this is all about the things that we have achieved till now. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to close, say yes, and now this is a student table. I give a name to the table, click OK. Okay, I haven't set the primary key, so right click over here, and there is an option called as primary key. Now I've set the primary key, so I will go ahead and save this as student, click OK, and you can see there is a table called as student. Okay, Now what we will do, we will create one more table, and this particular table is going to be the table for holding the marks of the student. Okay, this particular table will hold the marks of a student for one particular exam, you can say. So what I require is ID, which is going to be act as a primary key. So that is numeric. Let me just set this as primary key, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something that is student, that is student ID. Now what is student ID out here? And I'm going to set this as number. So student ID. Now I wanted to tell you about the foreign key, right? So let me quickly just fill the other fields also, that is student ID, and then I'm going to say the subjects, that is English, and I'm going to take this as a decimal, and or let me just have the whole numbers, okay, as an integer itself. English, then we have Hindi, and then we have maths. So in this I'm going to take it as number, then I'm going to take science and social. Again I'm going to take the number, and I will take one more, that is computers. Okay, so what is happening out here, that ID is the primary key, but what is student ID? Student ID is basically a foreign key out here. How it is a foreign key basically is okay, do I need to set anything about the field properties? No, I'm just going to keep it as it is. Let me just close this and give the name to this table as marks. Okay, I'm going to close this. Now you can see this is the student table, that is ID. I'm going to enter out here. I'm going to explain what exactly the student ID is going to be. Okay, so what happens out here is, before I enter, let me just show you the marks table. So this ID, okay, this ID, and I'm going to open this as well, and this. Okay, let us just, okay, there's only one. Okay, this is a student one, and this is the marks. Okay, have a look at these two tables. Okay, you can see these two tables. Now it's in front of you. Now what is happening out here, that this ID is the primary key, okay, and this student ID is the foreign key. So what is a foreign key? A foreign key is a primary key but of some other table, which means that, see, whenever you get a report card, so once you get a report card, you have all your information, that is your roll number, name, class, section, right, your father's name, mother's name, and then you have your marks of your subjects. So what is happening out here, we are not going to, when we say the marks table, again I'm not going to repeat the same thing, that is roll number, name, class, section, because already there is a table which is holding all that data. And now what we are doing is we are forming a relationship between these two tables basically. Okay, so ID is the primary key. ID is the primary key for the marks, and this ID is the primary key for student. But this student ID is a foreign key that will match with the primary key of the student table. So this is going to match with this ID. So this is the foreign key. Okay, and you can see that no email ID, as we have set that as a default value. Now what we can do is I'm going to close both of them, and let us go to tools, and then in tools we have the option that is relationship, and then I'm going to take both the tables. See, marks table, click on add, then select the student, click on add. So we have both the tables out here, then click on close. So these are actually, it's showing you the tables and the fields. See, this is the student table and this is the marks table. Okay, and now these two tables are connected. They are yet not connected. We are going to connect it. How we are going to connect it? We are going to form a relationship. That is, this student ID is actually, I should bring this out here. Okay, this student ID is actually connected to this ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do is the method is, you can give a single click of to student ID, give a single click. Okay, single click, and then drag this ID, student ID, to the ID of student that is over here, and then just release the button, and you can see automatically this relationship has been formed, that is 1 to n. So there is one out here and there is n out here, which means one to many, one to many. Okay, so this is how we have done this. We have formed a relationship. Okay, and now I'm going to click on close. I'm going to say yes, and now what happens is these two tables are actually connected with each other. And let me tell you again, I'll go to the marks. This is now the student ID is basically a foreign key. Now what happens is, if I enter a data, that is ID as 1, roll number as 1, name I will give something, then class I'm going to give class 10A, address I'm going to keep it as blank, even this as it is. Let's go to the next one, and this is roll number is 20, and this is class. Okay, I'm going to give the same class and section and leave everything blank, and close this, say yes. So I've saved the student table, and now I will open this once again just to show you, and there is a marks table as well. So this is marks, and where is the student table? Okay, and now what we need to do is, okay, see, this is the student table and the marks table. So ID, okay, I can have this one, but student ID I have to enter the same value, that is 1 and 2 out here. Okay, I cannot enter anything else, understand it. And then I will enter the marks out here. So what is happening is, basically when we will be generating the reports, so what it is going to do, the computer, what it is going to do, or the program, the DBMS software is basically going to open the marks table and take the ID 1, student ID is 1, right, and these are the marks. But to which student these marks belong to, how we will come to know this? We will come to know with the help of the student ID. So what the computer is going to do, it is going to open the student table, and then it is going to match this number 1 with this number 1 out here. So the foreign key will be matched with the primary key, and then it is going to take the roll number, the name of the student, the class, the section, the address, all the details will be printed on the report card, and the marks will be picked from the marks table itself. So this is how we have formed a relationship between the two tables. Okay, so let me have one more, that is 2, 5. And now you can see that there is an error. Why this error has occurred? Because you can see that student ID, I tried to enter something called as 45. Now, is there any student in our table? There are only 2 records which has the ID as 45. No, there is no ID with the number 45. So it's not finding the match out here, and that's the reason we have this error. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to keep this as 2, and now this is completely okay. So this is how we actually form the relationship. Okay, so I hope like this activity is very much clear to you. I want you to just go ahead and practice this, how we created 2 table, and how we have formed the relationship between the 2 table, and how it matters, okay, when you try to enter the data, what is a foreign key, what is a primary key, and how they are related to each other. All these concepts should be very much clear to you. Now please go ahead, and then I'm going to just give some theory part as well in form of notes, so you can find that notes in the in the e-content. So please go to the e-content and find the notes, so you can just read out those notes. And also I have uploaded the assignment which you are supposed to complete, that is a project work for you. So please go ahead and complete the project, and that project work will be in form of a printout. There will be a spiral binding and everything that I have shown in the classroom. which you have to submit it, before 5th December. Okay, so everything I've uploaded. So please go and find it in the e-content, and please complete the assignment as soon as possible. So that's it for today. Bye for now.